So I think everyone here knows me. My name is Doug. You can find me Software Doug everywhere. Even on the Peloton, you can find me Software Doug. And my quest in life is to figure out how search works. And I still have not completed that quest. I'm figuring it all out still as we go. And part of that, I think that is a interesting field is this agentic search space that is now emerging. I do a lot of consulting, and so people ask me about this, and this has become in the last 3 to 6 months, maybe topic number one of should we do agentic search in some way. And so I'm going to talk about what it is today, like why this is important, why people are coming to me as specific kinds of problems, I would say, are coming to me as a consultant to try to figure out why these things matter. And then sort of like what that actually looks like when you're getting nitty-gritty under the hood, what the code actually looks like. And Hugo will share this out, but there are some of the code you'll see here. You'll see there's a notebook, a Colab notebook. I think we're still allowed to look at code and dork around with notebooks. That's still allowed in this AI coding age. I deem it allowed because my name is Software Doug.
And
And
what I'll do is
so,
I will link to that in the Discord right now, but
cool.
I'm gonna get Codex to look at it for me, I think.
Okay, yeah, don't look at it yourself. Your
Definitely
eyes will,
not.
it's like the Ark of the Covenant, your eyes will burn. We need
Exactly.
something to like interpret this for us. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of what it looks like. This is the kind of thing, and I actually have a blog post I'm sure that Hugo can share about how to write your own agentic loop in 40 lines or so of Python. It's not that hard. And then I'm gonna spend a little bit of time talking about how we improve the quality of agentic search and what that looks like. And I'll leave just on a note of where some emerging cool things that I'm seeing out there now, because this is this kind of space that in 2 months will look completely different. So why agentic search matters. So in search, there's kind of two ends of the spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum, you have kind of your, I guess you would say Amazon search or some kind of like passive, I would say information retrieval. On the far, far end of that spectrum, you have recommender systems. People aren't even conscious of what they're doing. And the way I like to think about it is Daniel Kahneman, the famous behavioral researcher, talks about system one and system two thinking. And system one is your sort of passive, instinctual way of thinking about things. And that comes up a lot if you're dealing with recommender systems, if you're looking at YouTube of what to watch and you're looking at a feed. There's a lot of reasons social media sites kind of get at some of our worst instincts because of those feeds that are just driven by engagement. And that's like very on the passive side. Then on the very active side, I would say you have people who know exactly what they want. They could write a paragraph about what they wanted if you ask them to. And a lot of these people are people who search for their job. There are people like I see Brian Peterson here, who is a renowned recruiter in the search space. Their recruiters are some of the most skilled for a long time, at least. I don't know how if the space has changed with all the new search tools. A lot of times, like their whole thing was like building these complicated Boolean expressions of like, I'm looking for the ideal candidate that looks like this, and building a sort of like this sort of shape of a candidate and like getting a good set of candidates. And then you have probably what most of us do when we go to Amazon, which I sort of have over here from the search perspective. I think at one point when I was putting this together, I was looking for a Bender poster for my kid because he likes Futurama. I sort of know what I want, but as I look at the search results, I'm discovering what I want. And this side is interesting because a lot of times we do strike out and we are learning from the search results what's important. But today I'm going to talk mostly about this far side because I think that's where a lot of this agentic stuff comes at. Yeah, I think I started talking about a lot of these things. Yeah, there's a lot of discovery in in this search. Taste profiles are sort of like this too. You identify with a category and you're like, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I do like gothic romances or something." So you're discovering what you want as you're searching. Yeah, and then we have a lot of just active search, very people who search for my job, searching for your job. There is a class of people, legal researchers, financial researchers, legal discovery, medical researchers, that whose whole job is around searching B2B, e-commerce, you have a detailed explanation, a specification of what you want to find. So one thing I could do if I was agentifying this, if I did have a full specification, one thing that happens is you get these like, it's funny, LinkedIn literally relaunched their search recently. It's not an agentic search, but this is me frustrated with the having to gather in a traditional search tool all of these like I could spell out what I wanted in an ideal job in a paragraph if I wanted to, but I have to like break apart my search into lots of different individual keyword searches. And what I'm doing here, I'm using an AI browser. So you could imagine if I'm like a job seeker may be one of these people who they don't have a job, so they may not have a job, so they're actively searching for their job. I'm specifying some very detailed requirements in here of a Charlottesville job or remote friendly, has some search or Java expertise. And I'm trying to detail that to the agent in my browser. Java job near Charlottesville with hybrid working environment, good work-life balance. And the whole promise of agentic search is, this is being driven by one of the AI browsers to do this for me. But this is a clunky experience. So maybe someone like LinkedIn or, another job search site could build an experience that's doing this natively, that's helping me sort of explore what this looks like. And you can see, imagine this, there are financial tools, there are recruiting tools where people have to take a very complicated thing from their head and spell out two or three keywords, find what they want, bookmark one thing, save it off in a spreadsheet, and continue that loop. But that loop probably could be automated by an agent. Yeah. And this is just, yeah, this is repeating the same thing. This is basically what you have to do now. Like I'm gradually, you can imagine if you're job hunting, you're building a spreadsheet of this stuff. So one thing that's interesting about agentic search, it's often very powerful for these use cases where I I want to find, I don't want to leave, I want to leave no stone unturned, like exhaustive search. I want to not, like just make sure I've got everything covered. And sometimes traditional search isn't, that's not necessarily what it's focused on. Yeah, specifying a complex request. Agents, if you notice here, if you were following that, what agents are doing is they're able to analyze results and reformulate. So one thing that makes an agent, just to maybe take a step back, because I probably should have had a slide on this, what makes an agent really different than just a traditional RAG system or an LLM based system, agents can look at something and can use tools. In this case, the tool is driving a browser. They can use the tool, see the output, and then they can reason about what they saw, realize they made a mistake, and reformulate and do the next search. We sort of do this ourselves when we're searching. We will issue a search. It's if you a very common thing. Sometimes people think more searches is bad, but search is very much a conversation sometimes. If the traditional search bar, we are issue a search, realize that, oh, I type backpack. Oh, or what I really want is a backpack that fits a laptop I can fit some clothes into and is like rugged and stuff and can hold a water bottle. And then you type in some more search queries. And the agent sort of does that for us. So how do we structure this search and exploration loop? Well, everything I just told you where we're sending, it's funny because I started describing my task as earlier I was like, I have a very complicated job search task. I could write it out in a paragraph. I'm breaking it down into 4 or 5 keyword searches. I'm almost like passing all of this knowledge through a tiny pinhole straw to the search backend. And then the search backend has to like this is like all the things that if you ask a search person, how do we build a relevant search solution? They'll say, well, we have to understand the query. Maybe we have to apply some business rules like, oh, if they mention, we don't want Ashley brand, or if they mention purple next to a mattress, that probably means it's a brand, not a color, which is a common thing in the US. Maybe there's some embedding backend and a BM25 backend. We're like taking apart those like 2 words we get from that full paragraph and trying to re-explode it into something that makes sense and adding all this technological complexity. For agentic search, we're just going to chuck that because the agent really, it's what it's doing is it has a it's going to have a paragraph narrative of what we want, ideally, and it's going to be able to use tools to be able to retrieve from the back end, reason about what it found against that entire paragraph because it has access to like all of that language and decide to what next step to take on the search. So agents, like I said, come with two big features. They come with the tool usage, in this case, a search tool, and they come with reasoning. They come with the ability to change their mind. And if you think about this for a second, if you know anything about how coding agents work, one of the superpowers they have is they are really good at using grep. And grep is kind of, I joked half jokingly, can I build a semantic search solution, which is grep in like a bunch of files laid out in a file system? I don't know if that's either half crazy or it's half brilliant. I don't know. But grep is great. Agents know how to build regular expressions. They know how to grep a file system and these kinds of things. And what's really powerful about it is there is a very clear relationship between a stimulus, I put in this regular expression, and a response. Oh, obviously these three things match this regular expression. And so when we build search tools that for agentic search agents to reason about, we focus on this. We often just want to give it as a baseline, just give it the dumbest search tool that you can find. In this case, often a lot of my training and things that I do, I just work with a BM25 search. BM25 is a dumb keyword search. And agents can take that and reason about, oh, this use of these keywords to solve this problem didn't quite give me the answers I needed. So let me analyze the response and maybe issue a new keyword search because there's so much transparency in keyword search. It's like, obviously, I put this keyword in, I will get this result back. That agents can understand and manipulate how to use that tool in a more optimal way. I have a blog post on how I just plugging reasoning to a basic BM25 is like the basic lexical scoring system that's been around for 25, 30 years now. That's if you have that with reasoning, you can improve your search metrics by 15 to 30% just with a reasoning loop, which is of course not feasible for that search bar search that has to be really fast yet. Maybe one day it will be. But for a lot of us, it is for this kind of chat loop. It's amazing how much how much a simple search tool can just be augmented with agentic reasoning.
So, Doug, I've just linked to that wonderful post in Discord. Brad just has a quick question. If you could speak a bit more to the limitations of grep and file system search, if you have any concrete examples.
Oh, well, the most important thing with grep and file system search is it doesn't do any ranking. So that's where it breaks down. If you have if you have a file system laid out like in some rational, I think in my training, I do this with a category, subcategory file folder system. And then at the subcategory level, there's like text files with like a bunch of e-commerce products. And I'm like, go grep and cd into these directories and spin up subagents per directory to see what you can find. The big limitation, there's two limitations with that. One is it assumes that everything is neatly categorized into and in obvious ways, which in a lot of data sets, that's not the case. And two, there are things that transcend multiple categories. And the nice thing about a ranked search over that nicely organized folder system to get, if you get the 10 most relevant things, it's going to cut through all those. It's not going to be scoped to a file or a folder. It's going to give you, oh, there's you want a geometric style sofa. Well, there's 5 in the furniture category. There's 2 that are in the bargain bin category for some reason, and there's 3 over in the patio furniture that are like patio couches. So that's one advantage of that. You're kind of cutting through that organizational system.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
That's it for the time being. And just if anybody has more questions, put them in Discord and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have this. Yeah, this is the reasoning loop, and this can take you really far. I'm not doing anything that's training to the data set. This is actually, yeah, oh, I have the link to the blog post right here. These were the 2 data sets. Wands is a Wayfair annotated data set that's really nice because it's easy. It fits. It's like 50,000 documents, easy to play with. Esky is a much larger Amazon e-commerce data set of several million e-commerce products. NDCG here is just a comparison of ranking quality, how close you are to the ideal ranking across the queries that are available. So it's a lot of fun. So let's talk about what actually happens step by step in the code. You often start, what does this actually look like in code? And this is like, I want to emphasize something that I tell people all the time. This is an open design space. Calling something a best practice right now is maybe a bit shaky at best. There are maybe better practices are things that patterns that we have learned that seem to work. But your ideas are very welcome when you look at this code. I want you to think about it. So this is the classic setup for calling an LLM. We have a system prompt and we have a user prompt. The system prompt is kind of telling it to go and do some search. And we have some inputs. This inputs array is just the context, and we build up the context as we call OpenAI. This is the traditional way of calling OpenAI. This is not agentic yet. I mean, actually, there would be maybe reasoning and responding to the output, but there's no tools for it to call. And people at this point will say, well, if I want to give it tools, I obviously need to stand up an MCP server and all of these things. And I'm generally like MCP is kind of a technique of last resort for me. I prefer instead, if I'm working with this API, I can actually tell OpenAI what the tool signature is that I expect. So what I do is I add a parameter. This is a special syntax that of tool usage that we give the LLM, give OpenAI. I tell it there's search furniture, and in the notebook, I have a convenient way of turning a Python function, getting its name and getting the doc string, and turning that into a something I can pass in metadata over to OpenAI. I get that in here. I also tell it what the parameters look like of this function. And here there's keywords, and it is a string. A title is the name of this parameter. The title of this thing is keywords, it's string, it's required, and so on. And this is just, if you know Pydantic, if you know JSON schema, it's the same kind of thing. If you've ever used structured outputs, it's how you force the LLM to conform to a certain data schema with how it interacts. Yeah. So that's what the tools look like. We have to tell the agent, tell OpenAI in this call that there are tools available for it to use. And then what OpenAI is going to do, what the model is going to do is respond. And some of the responses are going to be of this item type function call, which is OpenAI's way of saying, I think Anthropic trademark tool usage or something, and OpenAI calls it function calls, but those are kind of interchangeable terms. And kind of hidden here, but if you want to go in the notebook and see how this works, there's some helper code that helps out with this annoying serialization and deserialization. But we see the tool name and we probably see that it's search furniture. So we look up that tool, we call it, we get a response. Also hidden is the serialization back into a JSON form that it can understand. And we just add that back to our context. It's marked with the ID of the tool call that came through. It's marked with some other metadata so that the agent can recognize it. But we're just building up this context of, oh, you wanted me to call these tools? Well, here are the responses of these tools. Let me just keep adding those. And yeah, that's what the call looks like, or function call. And we just call it back with the tools. Now it's just appended to this inputs. Notice every time we continually append the output. So this is a classic, we put this in a loop and we loop until there's no more tool calls. And then we can look at the output and see, oh, what were the search results that the LLM thought were best. This is the classic, most inner tool calling loop of the agentic world. And it's the core, I would say, Lego piece of everything that's sitting out there. So any questions on that?
We're good.
Cool. So I want to give you a taste of how to improve this stuff because you can go pretty far with that. The challenge becomes getting a higher quality signal. And there are cases where An LLM's understanding of your domain is not your understanding of a domain. So an LLM might not understand a furniture domain. A classic example I run into when I talk to people about LLM query understanding in my course is the idea of a purple mattress. Or sorry, that's not that LLMs generally understand that. Actually, a bistro table. So in the US, sometimes when people talk about bistro tables, they actually want patio furniture. And it's rarely I'm opening a restaurant where I'm going to need a bistro table, like a table for bistros. Bistro tables and tables for bistros are actually two very different things, it turns out. And LLMs won't necessarily understand that. And with query understanding, we can sort of like you shot some rules in here and tell it about the exceptions it needs to think about. Um, but what we do when we're doing an agentic search experience and we give it that query to find bistro tables or whatever, we need to hack in some extra capabilities. Yeah, this is exactly that. These are not useful for a restaurant. If we had a human in the loop that was inspecting the results, a human that could tell the LLM, I don't want a table for a restaurant. I want a table for my patio. And often you've probably talked to ChatGPT and had those exact conversations about something it misunderstands. And what we can do, though, is often in search, we can add a loop. Here's the agentic loop we just built. We can actually add another loop that I think of as the harness loop. I think the term harness is defined as lots of things right now. But the harness loop interacts with the users and most importantly, validates the outputs. It can restart the agentic, it can restart the context if it wants to, but validating the output is what we care about here. And validating the output could mean anything from like, here's kind of what the harness loop might look like. While, you might have a stopping condition. While if it's invalid, then we sort of mark it as invalid and basically call this agent again with a message saying like, you returned a bunch of irrelevant results. So earlier I was talking about doing this in a human in the loop way. Now we might be able to add a feedback mechanism that's automated that basically, because this is all just building text that's going to get added to our context, that could say, hey, I'm the user. I hated these search results. And we luckily already have in this giant search stack I threw in the trash some components that help evaluate whether search results are relevant for a query. You can have a sub-agent that's an LLM-as-a-Judge. That's another thing that is a buzzword out there we could maybe do. We also just have traditional search re-rankers that know whether or not how relevant an item is for a query, literally classifying a document as relevant or not, or relevant, mediocre, relevant, and so on. And so we could have a validator that says something like, if it's relevant, hey, this makes me happy. If it's not relevant, tell the agent this is not making me happy. And maybe the validator forces it to keep going. In this case, it's like forcing it to keep going until everything is relevant. But you could also do like have an acceptable criteria or make it try 3 times. It's kind of the classic try harder meme about agents and coding agents. That's another thing you could do. This kind of just looks like this. I want a bistro table, some search results, and now instead of the human responding, we have the model responding. No, this makes me unhappy. So why do I call this reinforcement learning in context? Well, if you think about reinforcement learning with human feedback, the classic way of training models, what that is are lots of examples of like an agent going along or an LLM going along, and there's something where an agent is a human is unhappy, and the LLM works really hard to please the human. Like we all know that LLMs can be sycophantic, and so I think of like the agent as a thing that really badly wants to please the user. So when we tell the user we're not happy, it's going to work like literally when we say work harder, that is kind of I didn't like that, work hard. And that is a kind of reinforcement learning. We're kind of guiding it away from these things that it saw that didn't work out and guiding it towards things that are, here are some things that actually work, that actually are relevant. So try harder to fill this context more with things that are relevant. So bistro table, all these bistro tables that are for my restaurant are making me unhappy. find things that actually like have to do with patio furniture. Yeah. And that's basically it. So that's the general vibe and sense of this. This is like really just dipping your toe in the water of this stuff. And this is a massive world. And it really gets into, I think, a lot of the cool stuff that we're seeing with, if we to take this even a step higher level, a lot of the stuff we're seeing with like OpenClaw and these kinds of things. So we have a challenge with long running agents. If we have an agent that's like we're restarting 100 times a day to go and find the best Java developers in the world or whatever, that's something. And we were having these agents scour the web, and we have to make sure that it doesn't repeat work, that it's always trying to find new things and be creative about going in new, different places. We have to have guardrails in place around our tools. Like tools can have errors to tell the agent, you're like, you've already been here, try again, try something different. We also have to encourage, summarize the state of the world and like, here are the things that you've tried and haven't tried in a way of doing compaction that helps the agent sort of like not repeat itself as well and guide it to reason about what's useful and what's not useful. So that's a big thing, and currently where I mostly leave my course at right now is like how do we design these long running agents? The other thing that's really just emerging, and I feel like in the last month has, I know it's older than, I believe it's older than that, but in the last month it's really been talked about a lot, is this idea of recursive language models. And one of the cool things about something like OpenClaw, it can generate its own code and execute it. And that's one reason it was able to like call its creator and tell it something over voice through. There's this crazy story that he tells about like it getting the skill for having how to make voice calls and then building code that does that to send a message to the creator. And if you can also take that further, so there's agents that generate code that does some work, which could be useful for search agents. There's even a further thing where it's like, what if agents had absolutely no, what if these LLMs have this problem if you're doing these long tasks of having unbounded context, of like just having huge context rot problems, right? Or running out of context. Well, what if we got rid of this idea of context entirely, and all of the information that had happened so far in this agent's life lived in like imagine a Python variable, and the only tool that one of the tools the agent had was the ability to run Python code to look and inspect that variable for what it needed. So it's kind of a way of searching within its own context. Then if you finally take that the even crazier direction, it's like, well, context just becomes bounded, and the entire world, including my search index that I'm building, just becomes like, how is that any different than any other context? I've said a lot of things, and I know probably I may have, if I lost you earlier, this will definitely lose you. But I do think some of these things are some of the cooler directions that we're heading that are really going to impact how we do search in the future, especially with chat environment.
Well, Doug, I love how you really showed us state of the art and how to build agentic search experiences today and why they're so useful. I do think the future music you suggested and what's happening now is really important. And you mentioned OpenClaw, right? And one way that it deals with context and memory very cleverly is markdown files, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it has daily memory, and then it will compact it into monthly memory after a month. And these, not quite, well, it is a compaction. And as we've seen, the return of text files, of course, has been incredibly wonderful with the advent of agent skills and all of these types of things as well. The other thing, to your point, I've been chatting with my OpenClaw on Telegram, sent him a voice message. He didn't reply for a bit, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Oh, I realized I didn't have speech to text, so I'm just downloading Whisper. Give me a second." And then he started responding to my voice messages as such.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, we do have
That's crazy.
Okay, it is I mean, there are some wilder things as well. We do have a couple of questions. Let's take one now, and then we can answer the other one in Discord. BMD has a cool question. Are there any agent frameworks such as Pydantic AI that feel well aligned to building agentic search? Alternatively, is there enough lift from creating a domain specific agentic framework targeting search, do you think?
Creating a framework is interesting. I will be honest, I haven't kept up with a lot of the framework stuff.
Not
I feel
easy.
like it changes a lot. Yeah, I've always built my own stuff talking to the model providers directly. So I don't have a good answer to that. I should learn more about the like Pydantic AI. I've heard good things about Pydantic AI, and what's great about that is so much of what I do is plumbing of Pydantic types around anyway. It does make me curious about that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
I don't really know, but there could be, an agentic search specific thing could be interesting.
totally. And I do think Pydantic, of course, is, as Jason Liu gave a talk on, Pydantic is all you need. But all of this universe integrates really well with the observability at Logfire and those types of things. There are lots of other frameworks, but I have found you don't want to adopt these things prematurely and hand rolling what you need at the start and then adopting mindfully because you will be building on
Yeah.
top of them as well. If we could just
So
go, sorry, go
my generic answer to all of this stuff is what is your team comfortable with? Because I get asked this about like search engines, for example. Should I use Elasticsearch or should I use Vespa? These are all like search technologies out there. Should I just use Postgres? And I always say like the number one thing by far is like, what is your team comfortable with? And the rest we'll figure out, right? That's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. So we have a couple more questions. We'll get to them in Discord because we will need to wrap up in a minute. If you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide, Doug. We have a few more sessions coming up. So next week I'm actually doing a build your own OpenClaw from scratch with Ivan Leo, who until recently was at Manus. And so that's going to be a really fun session. We're going to start with an empty repository and build a coding agent and then connect it to a bunch of things. Bring your coding environment and bring a container as well, because it's going to get wild. Then I'm doing one with Abby Morgan at Comet on the agentic lifecycle and observability with Opic. The one I'm most excited about is called F Agents. Let's build a workflow instead, that I'm doing with the one, the only Doug Turnbull. There is so much. Of course, agents are incredibly important and incredibly useful for applications such as search. Our thesis here is, though, a lot of things don't need agents and workflows can perform a lot better, and they're far more easy to evaluate and observe, particularly when you modularize them in pipelines. So we'll be talking about agents there, but also why and how you should be building workflows more generally. And just the final slide, Doug, if you wouldn't mind. As I mentioned at the start, Stefan Krautchik at Salesforce and I are starting out to teach our final cohort of building AI applications for data scientists and software engineers on March 10, Australia time. That's March 9, almost everywhere else in the world. So I probably should update the slide. Goes for 4 weeks. We've got 8 2-hour hands-on sessions, weekly builders clubs, lots of expert practitioners such as Doug, Sebastian Rajka. You get access to actually all 4 cohorts of previous guest talks, which is now like probably 80 hours of content from people like Kamal Hussein, Shreya Shankar, Jason Liu, and so on. And we have lots of compute credits, 500 and counting. I'll shoot an email afterwards. If you signed up, you'll get it, but love to offer you 25% off with this code. And feel free to get in touch on Discord or via email with any questions you have about that. Finally, Doug, you're currently teaching your course. Is there another
Yeah.
cohort coming up, or is there some way people can stay in touch
So
with you?
I will have another cohort it's currently marked as June. It might get bumped plus or minus a month, but so my course is called Cheat at Search with Agents, and it's everything that helps you with search around LLMs and agents, and covers everything from just taking an LLM to help take apart a query for traditional search, to LLM-as-a-Judge in search, to all this agentic stuff. And then also, how do we use think tools like Claude Code to build search code? Because as someone posted on Twitter today, something I feel like I've known for a while, just being in the search space, is like really a lot of these AI coding tools are actually can be better thought of as model fitting than they can be thought of as like just code generation, right? And if you're doing work around search, doing that kind of code generation to build a better search ranker can be a really powerful way of doing that. But it's a different thing than building like your node application. So yeah, I'm doing that. And then next month I'm doing AI powered search with trade grade. Sorry, which is more of if the cheetah search with agents is the bleeding edge, AI powered search is more foundational stuff in the last decade or so of how just search has been developed, like the core skills you need to be a search person. Oh boy. Something, okay. I canceled a sneeze somehow. That's the first time that's ever happened. So definitely check me out. I'm Software Doug on Maven, maven.com/software Doug.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for the great questions. We'll respond to the ones we haven't as of yet in Discord. And most of all, thanks, Doug, for coming and sharing all your hard-earned wisdom and expertise with us.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for coming.
Great. Hope to see you all soon. Ciao.
Take care.